Oh, no guy. Catman subbing for who was ever subbing yesterday, which is Brendan Dunlop. And none of the regulars are here. They're gone. There's nothing we can do. They're gone. Dave Feschuk over there. How are you, Dave?
Missing the regulars. But, hey, we'll do our best here without them.
Well, I don't miss them because when I'm here, they're normally not here. So
good point.
Yeah, and you and I have driven this show into the ground at Christmas, and now they're letting us do it in the summer.
We'll try our best.
Yes, we will. Have my best man on. It's what I like to say. I got to get this in because I don't want to forget this. OverDrive is brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. So we got some stuff here, sort of in limbo because nothing really scheduled tonight. The Raptors are playing the Nets in their final NBA Summer League game, and we'll get to the Raptors in a second. Obviously, not much percolating in hockey, but stuff on the way.
Yeah.
And as far as baseball goes, that resumes tomorrow night. So a bit of a limbo time. In fact, in the old days when I was a regular on television, I always took this week off.
Did you?
Well, I always equated it to if you work this week, it was like working 3 weeks in a row.
Okay.
Because it takes everything out of you. There's not much content.
Man, you're really revving me up for the show.
Well, this is different now because you and I don't do this every day, so I can easily do this for a week. But when you've done 36 before,
yes,
then you go, thank you.
I hear what you're saying. Look, I think it is a slow news week, but there's plenty going on. I mean,
I want to get into the Raptors, who are 0-3 and could be 0-4 after the game against the Nets tonight. And there's all kinds of, you could deal with Grady Dick and how he's coming along and Marquise Noel. And I watched the end of the game last night, and I found both, even though they had good totals for the previous 90 seconds, except for the final 90 seconds of the game, is what I'm trying to say.
Didn't look great.
No, the turnovers and just, and it is summer league, so it's not really systematic basketball, but loose is the way I would describe their play.
Very loose. Well, Grady Dick had the turnover down the stretch there, which essentially sealed the win for the Pistons. I mean, it's summer league. You don't really worry about wins and losses. You're looking more for, what is this guy and what can he be at the NBA level? And I think there's every indication that Grady Dick can be a reliable shooter at the NBA level if he can add the parts to his game he needs to add to stay on the floor, i.e., can he keep anybody in front of him? Because even his college coach has acknowledged that defense is not this kid's strong suit.
No, and some turnovers last night. But what you come away with when you watch him is boundless energy.
Yes.
And so, even if you went over those 3 games, you'd see the shooting was fine-tuned. And this is going to be a developing story all year, depending on how many minutes he earns.
Well, he's going to play minutes, I think. On this team that lacks shooting and just saw its most reliable shooter in Fred VanVleet walk out the door, they're going to need shooting. And Grady Dick is one of their only options as a shooter. So he's going to get minutes for sure. I mean, barring the fact that he is just such a liability on the defensive end that they just can't keep him on the floor. You got to believe that he will, be, to your point, he's got energy. He does appear to have some kind of a basketball IQ. The idea that he can become a decent team defender, even if he's never going to be a defensive stopper, I think is not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I've had maybe 3 or 4 conversations in the last week or so, and you and I touched on that famous radio show called Yes Guy that airs Saturday on TSN 1050 at noon.
Great show.
Shameless plug. And so this roster, I think they want to get back to developing, which makes sense. Coach Darko will do that. But it's sort of it's half and half, isn't it? I mean, you can see some development there, but then there's some top end players, and I don't know what to make of it.
It's hard to know what to make of it. I mean, there was a widespread expectation that Fred VanVleet would not be tempted by a bully offer like the one he was tempted by.
That was a bully offer.
Yeah, it was an incredibly great offer for Fred VanVleet, and he had to take it. It was a once in a lifetime chance to make a ridiculous amount of cash, and he jumped on it. But you're right, because he's gone now, and because you sort of dangled Pascal Siakam on the trade market, and that may or may not end up being brought over the finish line, but it seems to me like it's gone an awfully long way down the road for it to not have happened by now. Not that anything can't happen, and that it's a possibility that he could be traded. But even if you trade him or you don't, you're still sort of in this limbo. You've given up your first round pick in 2024 in the Jakob Poeltl deal. You're not really all in on either side. You're not really a developing team with a bunch of young guys that you can really look forward to their upside. You got some young guys, and you're not really, you're certainly not a contending team, and you're not really a veteran team, although you do have some veterans, i.e. Dennis Schroeder, who you officially announced the signing of yesterday. And he's going to be 30, and he's a good guard, but he doesn't address all your problems, and he's certainly not a replacement for Fred VanVleet. So you're right. The state they're in is officially, I think you call it limbo.
Yeah, and what's confusing for me is the Siakam talk. Because if you go back to why they don't have a first-round pick next year, it's because they acquired Pirtle, and they signed Pirtle for 4 years. And clearly when they added him, he was a perfect fit for Siakam. They'd played together before, and it seemed to fill a void on that roster, and it had a trickle-down effect on the other starters, and it was positive. And so you sign him for 4 years, and as soon as that happens, some people are reporting that Siakam will be traded, and you go, well, wait a minute. Now, you coughed up a first-round pick for this guy. You signed him for 4. I know you have to keep the asset, but clearly, when you went into the trade deadline, management meeting before the strategy meeting, you had it mapped out a certain way. And you know as well as anybody that when you have it mapped out a certain way in your front office and you change course, that gets really expensive in every sense of the word.
It certainly does. And it may turn out to be, the Jakob Poeltl acquisition was all for naught because you're not ready to have him around. If you want to take the flip side of that, though, Jim, I think you can because, Masai Ujiri has a history of knowing what he's doing in moments like this. I think the Jakob Poeltl acquisition was a good acknowledgement. Speaking of correcting mistakes, it was a good acknowledgement that their idea of not having a traditional big man in town was crazy, and they needed to correct it. Ever since the you go back to the exit of Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol, and then the Band-Aid that didn't really cover the wound that was Aaron Baines and Alex Len. That was terrible tough experiment. Yeah, it didn't work out. And then kind of going without a traditional big man in the wake of those two guys leaving town, it left the Raptors lacking, right? Lacking in rim protection, lacking in paint presence, lacking in so many ways, lacking in probably contributed to the fact that they lacked in half court efficiency all those years and couldn't really get buckets unless they were on the fast break, which led to Nick Nurse's idea that, okay, we got to create offense from defense and we'll become this deflection machine and we will get steals and we'll get deflections and tips and we'll get the ball moving the other way and we won't need a structured offense with an inside-out kind of dynamic that so many good teams have. Didn't really work, right? And as Fred VanVleet said it at the end of the season, chaos and freedom, which is sort of how he coined that Nick Nurse way of playing basketball, where you have the chaos on the defensive end that leads to the so-called freedom on the offensive end to run and gun. It played itself out. Fred VanVleet said it himself, and I think we all agree, those of us who watched the team this season.
They were worn out. No question about that. The bench didn't deliver. There was a lack of player development. And quite frankly, some of this stuff, you have to appreciate the outlier. Freddie VanVleet was the ultimate ad for how to develop a player, an undrafted player. Yeah. That's not everybody. And we learned that the tough way too, didn't we?
You certainly did. I think, we're going to find out, Jim, because we certainly have heard a lot of innuendo, a lot of side eye about how the problem wasn't that there isn't untapped potential on that bench. It's that Nick Nurse didn't want to tap it, right?
Well,
and certainly, there's a reason Nick Nurse got fired, and I think among those reasons is that I think the front office and he disagreed about how much that bench deserved to play. Now, on this particular matter, I happen to take the side of the coach. I don't see the untapped potential. I didn't see it in Malachi Flynn, although Malachi Flynn's going to get some run this year, and we're going to see what kind of player Malachi Flynn is with Fred VanVleet having left town. I didn't see untapped potential in Delano Banton, although, hey, the Boston Celtics certainly did.
Yeah, that's an odd one, isn't it?
Yeah, they signed him. So maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe Nick Nurse was wrong about that. But, I'm not sure there was enough untapped talent on that bench for Nick Nurse to have played them a lot more than he did. On the other hand, he played his starters way too much. There's no denying that.
Well, he did. The puzzling, and again, we get a lot of situations when you're describing this team that you go, what? And so one of them is Gary Trent Jr. or Precious or Boucher starting seemed to be okay.
Yeah.
But when you put them back on the bench, suddenly they couldn't earn the minutes, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, that's been a dynamic in the NBA for since the NBA started. I think right the prestige and the rewards handed to starters are obviously considerably more than the prestige and the rewards handed to bench players, right? Except for rare circumstances. So guys...
Well, is that the player not accepting the assignment?
I think a lot of times it is, right?
Yeah.
I think, and guys will say it's not, and coaches will say, hey, if you want to be a starter, play better off the bench, and maybe one day you will be a starter. And when the guys are coming off the bench, they'll say, "How can I play good off the bench when, I'm coming in cold and I'm not playing with the starters?" So it's a chicken and egg thing, and it's a source of internal tensions on every NBA team I've ever covered for sure. Except the really good ones where guys just accept their roles and know that there's no possibility that they deserve to be in the starting lineup, so they might as well make the best of their bench opportunities. And they've had those moments in Raptorland where they had the bench mob era.
Yeah.
You had Van Vliet and Pirtle and Siakam as bench players. That era made sense where those guys were on the up and up, and they were moving through their careers in a logical progression. And there was a real hierarchy in town. But right now, on this team, there's no established hierarchy, really. Everything sort of has always seemed up for grabs. And I think that's been part of the problem, is that, Masai Ujiri talked about watching selfish basketball out there this season. When there's no established hierarchy, when everybody thinks they're better than the next guy, when...
I don't know if I would say it that way. I would say they're in danger of losing and somebody decided to solve it himself.
Okay. Good way to, yeah, that's a fair way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair, but I do think it comes with, to your point about why would you trade Siakam? Maybe the most logical answer to that is this whole idea that, wait a second, you got the president of the team talking about selfish play, and you had three guys, at least three, but let's start with these three, Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, OG Anunoby, who kind of similar sized guys who sort of see themselves the same way, whether or not we see them that way. They see themselves as guys who can be central, offensive players on a really good team. And maybe that was a big source of the tension. And maybe it's only natural that if one of those guys was out of the picture and you brought in different types of assets in their place, maybe two of those guys would do better sharing the ball than three of those guys.
Well, and I don't know that it gets any better if you've got a guy going into the last year of a contract, which is Pascal. That has to sort of be rectified now, doesn't it?
Well, they haven't been forthcoming with the contract extension, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And there's that. Let's not pretend that we haven't noticed that Pascal Siakam. You assume through intermediaries because Chris Haynes of TNT is plugged into the NBA. Chris Haynes reported that Siakam wasn't interested in signing a contract extension should he be traded from the Raptors, which was sort of a not so subtle hint, hint, nudge, nudge, please don't trade me because I want to stay in Toronto. And when you take that a step further, his best chance at the Supermax extension is staying in Toronto. Right? Because that would, for him to get the Supermax, which is, of course, 35% of the salary cap instead of a modest 30%. We're talking about crazy numbers either way.
35%.
Yeah. But he would need to become an all-NBA player, all-NBA team player, one of the top 15 players in the league. And ergo, his best chance to do that, at least in the world he's envisioning right now, would be to stay in Toronto.
I'm going to ask you a Toronto question about fan tolerance in a second. Let's map out the rest of the show. At the bottom of the hour, Mark Masters will be reporting to us from Wimbledon. Marty Baron at 5:05. Yes Guy, No Guy at 5:30. At least one appearance of the trademark registered Yes Guy, No Guy on today's show. Mitch Marner at 6:15. He's at his charity function, so he's going to stop by for a few minutes. Sean Merriman will stop by as well, and he is the founder of Lights Out Extreme Fighting, so that could be a robust conversation.
Wow.
So back to the Toronto question, because I think we get to this on all these teams, at some point, and we went through it with the Leafs, the rebuild, and I think, I'm going to throw this out there, I think this city would understand a hockey rebuild much better than a baseball rebuild or a basketball rebuild. And I'm talking about going down to nothing. Would you agree with that?
Good question. I mean, obviously, the recent history, the Shanna plan would suggest to you, yeah, people were more than willing to listen to Brendan Shanahan's idea for a total rebuild, to take it to 30th place, to win a draft lottery, to get Austin Matthews, and to build it back up from there. There was no backlash on that. There was nobody saying, why did we finish 30th? Everybody in town knew what the plan was. Everybody in town knew what the potential rewards were. Problem is, 9 years into the Shanna plan, people aren't happy with
and Vegas
the spoils.
Vegas
right?
came along and went to a Stanley Cup final and then won a Stanley Cup in less time.
Yeah. But then you look at those other two leagues, though, like rebuilding isn't as clear cut necessarily.
That could be a long
baseball.
road. Well, even if the Raptors, not assuming this is going to happen, but if they made a couple of missteps and went right down, obviously you're going to get a good draft pick, but you have to win the lottery, and Detroit can tell you that doesn't happen all the time.
And some lotteries are better than others.
And that's right, and that's a massive. It's a hard turn when you realize it was 4 years ago they won.
Yeah,
that's difficult.
It's a difficult one, especially for Masai Ujiri. Like, you won the championship in 2019, and then Masai Ujiri was the hottest free agent in basketball that didn't wear shorts and sneakers, right? And ended up getting this motherlode contract to be the president in Toronto. By many reports, is making as much money as anybody's ever made to steer an NBA franchise from a front office. There's a lot of pressure on him to deliver the goods, right? And I think that's, you've heard these reports that the Raptors are difficult to deal with. Well, part of that, I think that's probably a good thing. You don't want your franchise to be known as easy to deal with. But part of that, I think, is just the pressure that Masai Ujiri has put on himself by, with the home run that was the Kawhi deal, and then realizing, it's going to be tough to top that. It's going to be tough to even match it in my career.
Well, you have to be positioned to do that.
Yeah, you do.
And that takes at least 10 years to accumulate all those assets that you can manage.
Well, let's hope, for Masai's sake, let's hope it's not 10 years before he can take a decent swing and
I know, but
pull off something important.
I mean, it did take 10 years the last time.
You're right.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to, first of all, we got CFL action tonight. Hamilton and Edmonton kick off at 9 on TSN. You can watch that. Hamilton's 1-3, Edmonton's 0-5, and as the Elks have never won at home. But everybody's. I was over in the prep area, and everybody was talking about this. I said, well, just when you think they're not going to win,
okay,
they're probably going to win.
Okay, is that going to be on the Grappler's FanDuel best bets?
I don't know. Can we twist his arm? Grappler, are you into that?
Am I into what?
Oh, guys.
Thanks for listening,
sorry to interrupt. Oh, guy.
No guy.
Yeah, there you go. There's your answer. No guy.
Wait a second. The Grappler and the CFL, I'm not sure that's a synonymous kind of sentence I'm just pointing out.
No, it's
no guy.
Yeah, not a lot of interest there on mine. Although, with nothing else going on tonight, my FanDuel best bets later in the show will actually feater the Ticats versus the Elks.
Yeah, man, let's break that down for a moment, though. Just as an aside, our good producer, the Grappler.
Grappler, who I haven't seen in years, by the way. Nice to see you.
But I find this shocking. Big sports fan, obviously, works in the sports industry, lives not very far from his recollection from the beautiful football stadium
Tim Hortons Field
in your beautiful city of Hamilton.
Well, I'm a Burlington guy now.
Oh, sorry, I shouldn't.
Oh yeah, I'm a crisp 9-minute drive from Tim Hortons Field.
It's a 9-minute drive from Tim Hortons Field and has no time for the CFL.
Really? Sorry to hear that. If the municipal government hears about that, you're going to get a tax boost.
That's why I'm staying awfully quiet back here.
I would back that. I would back that policy.
Wow.
If any sort of mayoral candidate came to me about it.
As I like to say, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just shocked by it. I just think, like,
well, you've known the Grappler for a few years. Are you really shocked?
Yeah, I'm sort of shocked. I am. Like, I mean, I'm one of these guys. Like, CFL is not my favorite, but if the stadium was 10 minutes from my house and I had nothing to do on a nice, beautiful summer night, I'd probably head down there.
Part of the community fabric.
There you go.
Especially there.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Well, and that being the case, and Dave, as we've alluded to, over the past few weeks, I haven't had a ton of free time over the last couple of months, and between wedding prep, wedding, honeymoon, and then even after we get back, it's amazing. Like, when I was a kid, like, plans could come, not even a kid, a young adult, early 20s, plans would come together very last minute. I had nothing else going on, so it's like, yeah, I'm free to go out downtown, hit a club, whatever. But it was amazing. It's like, after I get back from the honeymoon, you're looking ahead to the rest of the summer, and it's like that weekend's jammed up, have this going on, that going on. Even if I wanted to plan to go to a game on a weekend, I'm not around. And never mind, I mean, working the show until 7 o'clock. If they're playing on a weeknight, by the time I get back out over there, I mean, we're halfway through the game.
Well, you really...
JP, do you have any violin music? We should put that on. I mean, that was pretty sad.
I'm not looking for people to feel bad for me. I'm just explaining why I can't make it out to a game there.
I think it worked.
Is this your advertisement for being a newlywed? Is that what you're making the point that life's great as a newlywed?
I mean, I think so.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm glad you're happy. That's all that matters.
Glad to hear.
Mrs. Grappler, as she's
glad to hear. That's all I'm going to say.
Circles.
Good for you.
Mrs. Grappler wouldn't want to go to a CFL game?
Oh, Dave, you're killing me here.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
She's a Patriots fan and doesn't even track them. So Yeah, for someone who doesn't track the CFL, I think. I mean, at some point, I think we'll get out to one later in the summer. It's just it's not exactly what I would call top of mind.
All right,
Dave, that's code for no.
Okay.
It's not going to happen.
I do know the Grey Cup is there in the fall, potentially an appearance there, but I'll cross that bridge when I come to it.
When the championship game's in town, you're all in. I like that.
I would like to hear the proposal of how you're going to present that. That would be fascinating.
I mean, it would pretty much be me saying, would you like to go drive me 9 minutes down the road just so I can go drink like a buffoon?
That's a no guy. That's definitely
does sound like
guy.
a no guy.
Yeah.
That's not the way I'd put it to my wife. That's, you do it your way.
Yeah, good luck with that. We'll check in a couple of months. We have the Blue Jays back at home to Arizona, and at this point, we're hoping to find out. Don't have the starting pitching allotment, so don't know exactly which way that's going to go.
Yeah. Well, let's hope it goes better than it did in the first half for the Blue Jays. Not from a pitching perspective, but you got to get this show on the road. You got to think. Yeah.
Well, they've got to atone for some missteps in that the first cluster of games.
Yeah.
The second half, they have to make up for that. First of all, they got to solve how to play in their own division.
Wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
Wouldn't hurt. And they got to solve how to come through when there's runners in scoring position, because
sloppy, right? I mean, you look at it and you go, it should be. And I find that with the Blue Jays story, I tend to get to the same spot through different methods. I think each of the last 3 years, you start out and it's okay, and then whoa, what happened there? And well, time's running out. A lot of different things, but you end up in the same spot. Close, very close.
But really, just almost is not good enough in this environment, especially when you've been gifted this extra playoff spot, and there's no reason why you shouldn't be firmly entrenched in the playoff hunt. And look, they're in the playoff. They're in the playoff picture as we speak. There's nobody saying they're not, but it feels like they've left something on the table here.
Well, they have.
Yeah.
So you hope that that things can be tightened up, and the ultimate sway of emotions. I'm sure you talked about it earlier this week on Monday night. Vladdy Jr. wins the Homer Derby, and everybody's pumped.
Yeah.
And then the next night, Romano goes out with a lower back tightness, and you're going, "Oh, guy."
Yeah. Well, they got to hope that that's not a big deal. And look, you really can't complain about the way the pitching you've got from your rotation, even though Manoah has been the outlier and been trying to bring it back to the major leagues. And he's, the one start isn't necessarily an indicator that he's back, but it's certainly a good sign. But man, it's you're right. There's no reason why this team shouldn't be a lot better than it is, and they got bigger problems than this year too. We were just talking to Steve Phillips this week, Tatman, about how he's concerned that the fact that they haven't signed these two guys, Vladdy Guerrero Jr. and Bichette, the fact that they're letting those contracts and those extensions languish.
Do you think
he's not heartened by that? And this is a guy that's been a GM.
I get that, but do you think there's more of a maybe on a fan base more leeway for that? Just because in the past everybody scurried around and signed everybody, and it didn't necessarily turn out. I mean, I'm not a big fan of chasing people with money anymore if you haven't won. Obviously, there's potential there, and you want to keep that. I'm not saying walk away. I'm just saying you have to run after the guy with a wheelbarrow full of money.
No, I mean it's one strategy, right? You can make a case that a lot of teams don't want to go that way because it can be dangerous. And certainly, the longer these guys play, the better they get. The more of a track record they've got, the bigger the numbers in that track record, the more expensive it gets, right?
Well, price only goes up.
Yeah.
Check your real estate listings.
Right.
Yeah, there's never a drop.
So, and look, how many times we've been on this station for how many years talking about when are they going to re-sign these guys or sign these guys to longer-term extensions? And, there's been teams that have signed guys much younger to longer-term extensions and done well with it. And obviously the opposite is also true. There's a risk every time you do it. But, yeah, there's a lot going on in Blue Jay land is what we're saying here. And there's a lot to monitor between now and the playoffs.
Or you could look at it as the glass half full, even though they struggled they were within their own division and Manoah didn't have the expected first half. They're still there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the glass half full. And I think the other glass half full would be, the regression, the positive regression, they call it. That sort of oxymoron where they're not cashing in runs with runners in scoring position. And a lot of that is just luck driven, right? They're just not getting the hits at the right time. Maybe we had Ross Atkins on here, and he was talking about how he sort of hemmed and hawed about whether that was based on the pressure guys feel when there's guys in scoring position, that maybe the pressure is heightened a little bit, and consciously or unconsciously you feel it as a hitter, and maybe you try to do too much, or you don't come through like you normally would if you were just with, if you're the leadoff batter in another inning and there was nothing on the line or relatively less on the line. I don't know if I believe that, but there's also people that would say, hey, their approach has been shoddy when there's been runners.
So I always preface it by saying so far. It's 162 games and things tend to even out one way or the other. That's the true test for me, 162 games. We'll see where we end up. Mark Masters will join us next from Wimbledon headquarters. This is OverDrive. You're watching on TSN 4, listening on TSN 1050. OverDrive, Jim Tatti subbing for Brian Hayes, who has the week off, and Dave Feschuk subbing for Noodles and O-Dog. The 2-in-1, 2-for-1 sale. Let's go to Wimbledon now. Bring in Mark Masters, our TSN tennis reporter, along with our Maple Leaf reporter. And Mark, how are you today, sir?
Very well. Good to be on with you.
Our pleasure to have you. I'm just looking at the women's finals, and obviously it's kind of wide open, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, two players that have been in major finals, and Ons Jabeur was in the Wimbledon final last year, and came in as one of the favorites, I would say. Maybe she's not one of the big three in women's tennis right now, but she was right there with them. And Marketa Vondrousova is somebody who made the French Open final a few years ago. She hasn't been great on grass, but she has a game that really suits it. A lefty, big, long, loves the drop shot. So it should be a fun match. Perhaps maybe a little unexpected, but a good story there with Jabeur trying to avenge last year's defeat in the final. She had made the background of her phone the trophy, the Women's Championship trophy. She really made it the cornerstone of her year, and she came up one match short after winning the first set in the final. So that'll be interesting. And then Vondrousova had all these wrist surgeries last year and missed so much time, and now she's back up at the top of the game. So it's interesting. It'll be an interesting match.
So the men's bracket Masters come down to the semifinals tomorrow. You got Alcaraz, the number one seed, against Medvedev in the one semi, and of course it's Djokovic against Sinner. Is it Sinner or Sine from the Italian kid? Sinner, yeah.
Sinner, yeah.
The Italian guy, the 8th seed. Among those three other guys that aren't the career leader in Grand Slam victories, which one in your mind has the best chance of knocking off Mr. Djokovic to win the title?
Can I pick none of the above? I mean, that's honestly, that is the way. I can't find anyone. Been here for a week and a half, a little longer now, and I can't find anyone who's willing to pick anyone other than Djokovic. I can't recall that. I guess this is just the era we're in right now, but especially on grass, with him having won 4 straight of these, hasn't lost on grass since 2018. At Queens, hasn't lost on center court at Wimbledon in more than 10 years. He was asked after the last match he played if he considers himself the favorite, and he said, not to be arrogant, but yes. And that's just the way it is. But if I had to pick one of the other guys, I'll take Alcaraz. He's young, so he doesn't have all the scars of losses to Djokovic in the past. But although what happened at Roland Garros is probably relatively fresh in his mind with the cramping and falling apart in that semifinal against Djokovic, but he's got the game to do it. And if he can put it all together, he just won Queens, so he's on a long winning streak. He's feeling good on grass. So if anyone's going to do it, I'd have to go with Alcaraz. He's certainly the favorite, it would seem, against Medvedev tomorrow, and it certainly feels like he's on a collision course with Djokovic for the final.
Mark, I want to go back to women's singles play, the semifinal today. Svitolina, who plays out of Ukraine, was eliminated, but you were there. So when you saw her win in advance, just because of the world situation, that had to be something special.
Yes, it was. It was a great story. I mean, she's only been back on tour from maternity leave for 4 months, and she made the quarterfinals at Roland Garros, semifinals here, and the fans were really rallying behind her and that storyline. And she's played, it was interesting, Svitolina, more of a counter-puncher defender in the first stage of her career, and has played a bit more aggressively since she's come back. Iga Swiatek, the world number 1 who lost to her a couple days ago, said she's playing with a lot more freedom. seems to have more guts, and she said she's motivated motivated to give the people back home in Ukraine something to cheer about, something to rally around, and also it has helped her on court. She says the war has changed her because she's now in those tough moments on the court thinking about how she's, those are relatively easy moments in comparison to what's going on home in Ukraine. So that was a great story. And there was it really did feel like for a moment there we were going to get Svitolina versus Sabalenka, which would have been a very politically charged final. Sabalenka being from Belarus and having been banned last year as part of the Russian-Belarusian ban. So as it turns out, they both lose, and it will be a much more straightforward just tennis final here on Saturday. But the Svitolina storyline was certainly compelling for a big chunk of this tournament.
So, Mark, we haven't had you on since the Canadian contingent was eliminated, and I guess there was some really positive stories. Obviously, the return of Milos Raonic after his long battle against injury, to at least get a victory in the opening round, and then obviously, some less than not necessarily negative stories, but Denis Shapovalov, Felix Auger-Aliassime, and Bianca Andreescu, obviously not living up to the potential that they've laid out for themselves in falling relatively early. When you look at those three, Shapo, Felix, and Bianca, what's sort of the next step? Like, can you go was there a moment in the tournament that at least gave you a sort of idea of where they might be headed from here? I know Shapo's hurt, but the other two, what are you seeing?
Well, Felix Auger-Aliassime also dealing with a knee injury, although there was a development today as he posted on social media about how he's resumed training and is looking forward to playing in Washington the week before Toronto. So that's a good sign that he's back, because we weren't sure if he was going to take a long period of time off. He hasn't really played much. He lost in the first round of the French Open and then the first round in Wimbledon. And again, this knee tendon issue has really been bothering him. There's been inflammation. So that has led to some losses and a loss of confidence. So I'm not sure where he's at. It's tough to get a read, but that was positive today to learn that he's feeling well enough and he's planning to play Washington. Denis Shapovalov, to be honest, for a lot of them, Denis Shapovalov, Bianca Andreescu, and Leila Fernandez, they leave Wimbledon in a better shape, at least result-wise, than you would have thought coming in. They were all kind of cold. Shapovalov makes the fourth round, loses against a guy he should beat, but he's got this knee thing. So if the knee allows him to play, this is something to build on and some momentum. He's working with James Blake now, the former world number 4. That's something that came out of this tournament. And James Blake, I talked to him yesterday, and he says he wants to continue that relationship. So they played similar styles, even though Dennis is a lefty and James Blake's a righty, straight ahead, flashy one-headed backhand. So that could be a good positive development if he's healthy. Andreescu, I think that's the best news story, even though she went one round fewer than Dennis, is she loses to Jabeur, and that's obviously not a bad loss considering Jabeur's in the final. And she really seems to have some momentum going now. Seems to be finding her game a little bit more. She dominated Jabeur really in the first set of their match and looked as good as I've seen her in a while. So there's some confidence there. There's some momentum, and I think she can take a lot out of that. So I think for a good chunk of those Canadians, Wimbledon, even though they didn't get the results that maybe you would have wanted to see in terms of going really deep, I think that they used it almost as a jumpstart to their season. So I actually came out of Wimbledon for them feeling a little more optimistic than I did going in.
Okay, let's go over to Raonic, and he's been added to the National Bank Open, which is in Toronto early next month. It sort of plays out like this is the end. I know you've talked to him. What's your sense of that? And if it is, what does he do next?
Yeah, I think it is the end of the road for him this season. I'm not sure if he'll go to the U.S. Open. He would be able to, but I don't sure. Honestly, finishing in Toronto to me is I don't know if it's the perfect ending, but to do it in your hometown, because the U.S. Open was never a great slam for him. In fact, it's the only Grand Slam where he never got out of the fourth round. He even had a quarterfinal at the French, but he never got to the quarterfinals in the U.S. So it's not like there's any special moments there. In fact, a lot of his memories will probably be painful losses, including like a 2:26 a.m. 5-set loss to Kei Nishikori that was tied for the latest finish at the U.S. Open for a while. But he has talked about how his body is just he let him down. He wanted to work his way back so he could go out on his own terms, have a proper farewell, and doing it in Toronto would be it to me. And I'm sure he'll get a huge ovation and a huge response because, as we've talked about, he's one of the great players we've ever seen out of Canada, really a trailblazer, helped inspire the next generation, and that should be a pretty emotional scene when he does take the court in Toronto for almost certainly the last time in Toronto, because he'd have to stick around 2 years to get back. But it sure feels like this is it, and I'm glad that he's worked his way back to get this one last chance in Toronto.
So, well, you're la-di-da over there in London, Masters. There's been a little bit of hockey news. I'm not sure what you've chimed in on, given that you're on your tennis mode, but I'm sure you've been paying attention. What have you made of the sort of the one-year deals that Brad Treliving's handed out to the likes of Tyler Bertuzzi, Max Domi, John Klingberg, and, of course, the 3-year deal to Ryan Reeves? Some changes, although the so-called core four remains the same as we speak, at least for now. What do you make of it?
Yeah, it feels like it's still like stuff to be figured out here. We haven't seen any big shakeup on the back end other than that Klingberg signing. It's definitely a different feel than when I left on July 1st and it was Ryan Reeves and John Klingberg. There was a lot of people wondering what's going on. But Domi and Bertuzzi, I think, are good bets and will be good additions. And that July 1st availability, Treliving talking about the need to. It's a quiet room. It's a good room, but it's a quiet room. They need some personality, and they certainly injected that with Domi and Bertuzzi and Reeves. And we'll see what sort of guy Klingberg's at, but should be a pretty motivated guy. So I'm intrigued. I'm excited to see what happens. I've been trying to keep an eye on hockey. I know I can tell you Austin Matthews was at Wimbledon this week, taking in some of the tennis. He's keeping a low profile, but he's a huge tennis fan, and he took in some of the matches this week. But you're keeping an eye, keeping the tabs. Mitch, I know Marner's coming up on your show today, and it's his assist found, so I'll be interested to hear what he has to say about it. But I still feel like there's more to come, obviously, this offseason, and Treliving might have some more moves to make. That's just the sense of it, obviously.
Well, since you're at Wimbledon and we are talking Leafs, I'm going to use a tennis term with a hockey question, net play for the Leafs. How do you think that shakes out?
Yeah, that's a very good question, right? Well, we have to see the arbitration and what shakes out with Samsonov, but I assume he'll be back, and then the question is Murray, and I'm not sure. I don't have a read. Will there be a buyout? Will there be a trade? How it works out, it doesn't feel like it makes sense to bring him back, but especially with the way Joseph Wall played in the playoffs and down the stretch, and looks like he passed him on the depth chart, but it's new management, and Treliving made it clear that he'd be fine going into the season with 3 guys, and that he's seen situations where the young guy finishes strong, but he doesn't start strong the next year, and you might want to have a Stanley Cup champion there to mentor and to be there. But obviously 3 goalies can make things a little complicated, right? But I don't know. We'll have to see where Treliving goes there. That was the one thing that it felt like his predecessor Kyle Dubas could never really get sorted during his time in Toronto, was the goaltending situation, and it kind of remains a bit of a riddle for them.
Of course, we're burying the lead here, Masters, but to get to the most important part of the interview, everybody wants to know, how is your trivia game? Team Corsi, are you guys working on things? You and Jonas ironing it out to come back on OverDrive for a triumphant return, or have you just given it up? Where are you on trivia?
I'm not in a good place, Dave. I'm not in a good place, a dark place. I didn't think I could get worse, but they had the rain delays early on, and Shapovalov had mentioned that all the Canadian guys were kind of playing trivia, and they were doing animal trivia. So I tried to be like, I'm a trivia guy. Let's do some trivia during our interviews. And boy, was that a mistake. And he's asking me these questions. I can't even name a mammal. I don't even know frog isn't a reptile to the amphibian. It's just digging a deeper and deeper hole. I got to go back to the basics. I got to go back to the drawing board. It's not good enough. I still think I can be a good trivia player, but I'm getting on in years, and I don't know. Maybe the motivation isn't where I thought it would be, but I'm going to try and get back. Jonas Siegel dumped me. I joined up with Mark Rowe. Yeah, he cut me, and it was devastating, to be honest, because I had supported him, and we've been through a lot together, and he dropped me, and that's fine. He sought out a new partner in Chris Johnston, and And I sought out Mark Rowe, who was happy to join forces with me on #Team Tennis. So I got some work to do. Denis Shapovalov showed me that I have some work to do, and I'm going to study up. And the goal is to get back onto OverDrive in a trivia competition and avenge the many, many losses and embarrassing moments. And I'm on the low ebb of that right now, but I'm working my way back.
Well, I'm told it was an unfortunate set of circumstances. Nobody's fault.
It's no one's fault, yeah.
Mark, thanks very much.
That's my pleasure. Thanks for no trivia questions.
Platypus and anteater. Yeah. Mark Masters reporting to us from Wimbledon.
Sounds like he's just got to start like reading Wikipedia right from the beginning. Like that. That's like where he's at.
Prepping to go on a game show, but then you get overload. You have to be able to channel the knowledge, right?
I don't know how you do it.
I never could.
I'm not going on Jeopardy anytime soon. I'm not challenging Ken Jennings. I'll tell you that.
It's an unfortunate set of circumstances. It's no one's fault.
Thank you, Lou.
KP, thank you very much. That was extremely well done. Coming up next, we have some sound. Okay, thank you. This is OverDrive on TSN 4 and TSN 1050. Oh, yes, Guy, it is. It's you. You're the problem. The replacements are here. And by the way, I want to say this is the Tat Man with AI. The aging. This is the aged Tat Man. So we're just recording stuff so that when I expire, I can still do shows.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Legacy project.
Well, that's right. That's the S Guy legacy.
I like it.
So this will show up 10 or 15 years from now, or maybe even 25.
You just have to say like every word in the English language.
I've already done that.
You got it in a vault?
Yes, it's already happened.
Okay. You got to say all the names of every potential athlete.
Well, in the past, you can't. What are you going to do? Make up names for the future?
That was about to be my next question is how would you do yes guy, no guy with athletes who have yet to be born?
It would have to be classic yes guy, no guy. Classic.
Well, if you go through all the baby name books, you just name all the names, the first names, and then you go through the phone book.
I don't know if I have enough time to do that. I mean, I don't.
What else you doing? What else you doing, Daddy?
Well, I've got the S Guy Empire. That's a full-time job.
Yes,
I mean, just the invoicing alone,
and the legal matters.
Oh, that is. I don't even want to get into that. By the way, Yes Guy, No Guy will appear in this broadcast at 5:30 this afternoon.
You get a royalty for that, I'm sure.
I waived it. I'm a generous guy.
All right.
I was asked. I waived it.
All right.
It's when you don't ask that's the problem with the trademark business.
I see.
Just putting that out there. Marty Baron will be with us at the top of the hour on the Maple Toyota hotline, and we're going to get into the pricing of Samsonov because it's July 13th, which means a week today is the 20th, and a week tomorrow is the actual arbitration hearing, which you do not want to participate in. You want this solved as you're walking up the steps or prior to that event.
Yeah, you don't want to go in that room.
No. And once you get in the room, that's it. You can't turn back.
Yeah, because then it turns into the team is making a case of why you don't deserve.
Well, things are said that can't be erased.
Things are said that can't be unsaid.
Speaking of AI, yeah,
they're not always nice things. And so you're right. It's much better if they can come to an agreement before the arbitration. And look, to me, it shouldn't be that difficult, but.
Well, we'll get into this with Marty Baron, but I'm going to throw this at you right now. What do you think is the trickier number, the actual salary or the term?
Well, to me, it's term with goaltenders. You saw Jonas Korpisalo sign with the Senators, and I think most people were like, okay, $4 million, that's going great for a
5 years, though.
But a 5-year term.
Yeah, that's. I'm not into term much anymore,
well, especially on this position. Like, who has figured out how to scout goalies? And who has figured out which goalies are going to play well this year and then play well again next year? It's a very difficult position it seems as though it's a very difficult position to repeat performances, to maintain excellence. There's only a few guys that have done that. So, yeah, I'm with you. Like, the beauty of Samsonov last year was that he came in on a 1-year prove-it-to-me deal, $1.8 million. And hey, he proved it. He was.
And Washington didn't want to qualify him.
And Washington didn't want to qualify him because Washington would make a long-term commitment to him. So, you know what? Now, will he take another 1-year prove-it-to-me deal? No. But I don't want to give him a 5-year deal just because he had one good year.
Well, the trick is he's going into his final RFA year, so you're buying UFA years.
Right.
I don't know what that costs. The exercise I do, and we're talking about 5 years, 2023. Go back to 2018.
Right.
That's a long time ago.
Long time ago.
Think of all the things that have happened. I mean, you're expecting and anybody who signs these contracts, both sides are expecting things will track forward in a nice fashion. Well, we already know they don't.
Yeah. No, it's impossible for me to see the wisdom in signing this type of a goaltender, a guy who, one team just gave up on a year ago. The Leafs benefited from that this year, but it doesn't mean they're going to benefit from it for the next 5 years. So I'd be short of term. But to your point, he's got good agents. They're going to make a case for the fact that they're buying UFA years, and that's not going to be cheap.
Well, he's going to have a list of criteria that will make him happy, and the Leafs will have their list, and you hope that there's common ground. So we'll get into that with Marty Baron at the top of the hour. Also coming up, Yes Guy, No Guy, Mitch Marner will be by at 6:15 from his charity event. It's a yearly thing. It's been going on for a number of years. That's all next. This is OverDrive on TSN 1050 and TSN 4.